I am so ready. Countdown, 3.
I don't know how those companies effectively stay in business in the future.
What you two are doing is a boundless mindset.
Thinking that you weren't going to have to learn a lot. Well, you made a huge mistake.
There's one place I felt safe geeking out is
It's
here.
here.
There's a reason why we chose technology and not marketing.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CIO Project. It's coming to you live from our Austin studios in the great state of Texas. I'm sitting here with my co-host and longtime friend and colleague, Brian Schild. Brian's the CIO, CTO, and SVP of the famed Boston Red Sox and the National Chair of Inspire CIO, the fastest growing and most influential CIO association in the country, with 40 markets and over 1,700 members. How's it going, Brian?
Awesome, Howie. Great to do another one of these. So
Yeah.
exciting. So
Number
Howie,
2.
Yeah, absolutely. So Howie and I have known each other for more than 25 years, I think. And, he's the CEO of SherpaTex, and he's one of my go-tos and a good mentor of mine. So we're really excited to do another one of these with all of you and look forward to today's guest.
I appreciate that, Brian. We're really excited about today's guest, and we'll get to him in a second. Really quick, can you share a little bit about what we're trying to achieve in our podcast now that we're, 2 shows in right now?
Yeah, one of the things that we're really focused on is we're big believers that really kind of behind every sort of leading edge technology and visionary strategy and attempts to execute and things like that as CIOs or aspiring CIOs, there's a very personal journey, a journey about, overcoming obstacles, journey about sort of how to innovate. And oftentimes those obstacles create failures. And so one of the things we talk a bit about is about our confessions a little bit, lessons learned.
Confessions is our staple. Yeah.
Yeah. We're big believers that, as folks oftentimes say, you learn a lot more from your failures than you do your successes. And that is 100%. Completely true. So we're, that's kind of, I guess, really the journey is really a personal journey. And around that, we achieve hopefully sort of some of these results for all of you by basically bringing on great guests, thought leaders, CIOs, CTOs, some VCs, authors. We have a long list of folks coming up that we're very, very excited to kind of introduce you all to. So that's the program format, and we very much look forward to the show and hope you do as well.
Well, that is a great segue into introducing our new guest. And I'm going to bring him on here in a second. And Brian, I'm going to let you introduce him because I know you guys have known each other for a long time and are good friends. Welcome, VALA AFSHAR. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Great. Brian, tell us a little bit about VALA.
Yeah, absolutely. it's funny when Howie and I first started talking about doing a podcast, VALA's name, and Howie will correct me on this. I promise you if I wasn't accurate, but he was the very first person I thought of. And I say that because for those that don't know VALA, very well known. He's the chief digital evangelist for Salesforce, but he's much more than that. He's written multiple books. He's got another one we'll be talking a little bit about today. He, you might have read a lot of his work on ZDNET, and you probably know him as a host of with Ray Wang for DisrupTV. So he gets around, and he is exceptional. So we're honored and blessed to have you joining us today.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Howie. The pleasure is all mine. I wish my parents were listening to this because, that was a pretty cool intro. So thank you so much. I'm humbled by your kind words. Yeah,
absolutely. So VALA, tell us a little bit more about what you're up to. We've been going through your book, Boundless. I know you got another book coming up. One of the questions that I have for you, if you could just riff on this a little bit, is kind of what drove the Boundless book for you? And what was its origin?
Thank you for referencing the book. As you and Brian know, writing long form is not a superpower that many people have. Certainly not mine.
That's hard.
Super hard. I'm an electrical engineer, and I wish undergrad and grad, if I could go back, I would pay more attention to my writing courses and less on circuit theory and physics and calculus and everything else that came with becoming a double E. I'm an immigrant. I'm an immigrant refugee. So my family abruptly moved to the States when I was young. And I'm not speaking about on behalf of all immigrants, but as an immigrant who had a disruptive event, anytime you leave your birth country, whether it's by choice or otherwise, it's disruptive. I didn't speak the language. I didn't eat the food. I didn't play the sports. I didn't wear the same clothes. Everything was different. And I
How old were you?
From 10 years old.
Yeah, 10 years old.
So I didn't, I'm just being placed into 5th grade, and I can't understand anything around me.
Yeah, that's rough. Yeah.
In Boston, and the Celtics are making a championship run, and I've never seen a basketball in my life. So it's
Oh, man.
but we were in a safe place. In any event, as an immigrant, I had a silo mentality majority of my life, all the way into my 40s. So this wasn't just early in my life, and silo, what I mean by silo, I mean capture resources. So son, you're going to school and you're going to get an undergraduate degree, and then you're going to get a graduate degree, and you're going to get a good job, and you're going to get a budget, and you're going to get headcount. Capture resources. So I think to ensure a sense of belonging and mattering, and then protect those resources, and then extract as much value. Now, silos are 11,000-year-old concept in food and grain, and silos have been around us. Businesses have been formed with silo structures.
Yep.
And I realized in the last 10 years the negative impact of silos. So Boundless to me was an opposite mindset to silos, especially in this world of AI, where as professional technologists and successful CIOs, a 14-year CIO of the Red Sox, you understand, maybe the longest tenured CIO in sports, I'm not sure, but that sounds like a lot to me. Silos can be the most negative impact on your business when it comes to data, when it comes to talent, when it comes to culture. Right. So I wrote the book just to remind folks of the negative impact of silo mentality. And by the way, if you were keeping score, in my 40s, graduate school, good job. I was promoted. I was a chief marketing, chief customer. So if you were keeping score, I was doing okay. But it was until I realized that I needed to shift my mindset to more, sharing. What you two are doing is a boundless mindset. We all are ferocious consumer of data and information. We read, we lead businesses, and we have big budgets. But when you take the time to write a blog, or you take the time to post something in a LinkedIn forum, or you take the time to do a podcast, you're essentially sharing your knowledge. And that's what I was not doing in the first 40 some odd years of my life. Yeah. Everything was kept close. And I realized that I would never be in a position to be the first evangelist at Salesforce if it wasn't for the podcasting, blogging, my first book, and my social media presence, and the willingness to, when Brian reaches out to me and says, I'm gathering 500 of the brightest CIOs in Boston. Would you mind coming and speaking to the group? In the past, like in the first 40 years, I would be like, imposter syndrome would kick in. These are the best and brightest. This is Brian's circle. So these are the brightest technologists in the world. I would say no. Now I will intentionally struggle and go and be a panel member, or perhaps give a keynote. And that shift in mindset has opened incredible doors for me. And I have joy. I have joy doing what I do now.
Yeah. I can relate so much to what you're talking about in terms of that sort of like, we're so busy going through our day, doing the things that we need to do. Everything's kind of kept really close. We're in our own little personal silo as we go through our life and our day and our career and the work that we have to do. It sounds like it wasn't super easy for you to start contributing, right? Because that's actually a human need, is to contribute. But because it isn't for me, and it's not because I don't want to, it's not because I don't have visions of it. It's that it isn't necessarily part of my normal routine, and sometimes I just don't feel like I have the energy for it. Tell us how you made that shift.
Believe it or not, a former colleague of mine decided without asking me to create a Twitter account for me. This is going back 12 years ago. His name was Dan Patlon. He was a CIO at Intersys Networks. And Dan sends me a note, says, I just created a Twitter account for you. Give me a sec. I'm going to come to your office and tell you why. He walked into my office, opened up his laptop, and he said, internal to Intersys, we had our social network. It was powered by Salesforce Chatter. I'm going back more than a decade.
Going back,
and he says, for the life of me, I don't know why, but you're the most followed person at Intersys on Chatter. By the way, you didn't do a great job selling. He's like, I find you boring, but you have the most followers in our company, including a CEO. So
he's really selling it.
But he wasn't, but lesson learned, if you have good intentions, even if you don't sell it well, you might be able to actually move the needle in a positive way. he said the problem is all the chatter content. And I was the type of executive that if I had my weekly staff meeting, almost every other one, I would kick it off with a TED Talk because I wanted my direct reports to learn how to be better humans. It wasn't about being better technologists. I wanted them to be better managers. I wanted them to have empathy and humility and self-awareness, stuff that I couldn't teach them. Soft skills are the hard skills. And I needed TED Talk speakers to help me create an environment where we had a high-performing team that cared about the people more so than anything else. Anyway, and I would share that internal on our social network. What Dan reminded me is none of this content reached our customers, our partners, the analysts, the folks outside the walls of Enterasys. So he said, look, it's only 140 characters, super easy to use, not great advice. Brevity is the soul of wisdom. 140 characters actually meant you had to think a little bit more. But I promised to him that I would use it for a month. Of course, being a smart CIO, he took my badge employee access photo and put it on my account. So I didn't have an egghead avatar. He gave me the bio. So it was actually a very well designed Twitter handle and with the proper bio, with the proper photo. So I started using it and I realized, wait a minute, I can connect to Brian Shields, CIO, without going to his chief of staff or his admin directly on this platform. So I started following the people I admired most, authors, venture capitalists, CXOs, and I found myself having conversations with these folks, not right away. Again, you have 10 followers, nobody knows you, but I made a commitment. I did make a comment about Tom Peters, who was the author of In Search of Excellence. Book came out, I think, in 1983. I had studied it in grad school. I read a Fast Company post that he had written about the brand you, and I made a comment and I tagged him. And Mr. Peters responded to me. And I had this aha moment that one of the greatest management thinkers in the world, for 10 years, his book was the most popular book in the Library of Congress for business books. He has written 21 books, sold over 15 million copies. And here I am having a conversation with him on this platform. And I realized this is magic. So that was the push I needed to encourage me that if you have something to say, don't hold on to it, especially if something that you think, honestly, if you think it's going to be helpful to someone. So I built my muscle of being an introvert and having imposter syndrome to someone who actually finds joy and is intrinsically motivated by sharing, doing what you're doing right now with the podcast. And it started with a CIO creating an account for me without asking my permission.
That's a great story.
Over 1 million followers on a couple of social networks. And I owe it all to Dan because he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. Someone who is willing to find good content and share. By the way, it doesn't feel like a superpower because we all read and are, we have accessibility to content that educates us, that inspires us, that motivates us to take action. But we don't take that next step. You two decided you're going to do a podcast. Believe you me, podcast is heavy lift.
Yeah, it's
most podcasts, 99% fail to get to double-digit number of episodes. So for you to make that decision, something had to push you. And I love the fact you're doing it because you are two of the most knowledgeable people I know. So this is going to be an amazingly successful podcast.
Well,
we only have 8, and we only have 8 to go.
Yeah,
go ahead, Brian.
That's an amazing story. But you know what, Val, you're right. Like it's like I think one of the things that we really are focused on in these programs is really kind of about kind of trying to inspire other CIOs to sort of make similar transitions. Or just open up your, mind to new exposures and things. And as you were referencing before with AI and other capabilities and things and learning, we're back again at the phase where it's like, I'm sure you're like me, like I don't go through a day now where I don't learn something new about AI that actually has a real positive impact on my work or my life and things. And I think, a lot of us, we want to share those things because we are big believers that, like, especially with CIOs, like there's no formula for being a CIO, right? No two CIOs have kind of gone through the same journey, but watching people sort of have to sort of step on the same landmines when some of these problems and issues have been resolved is really what I think we're all about. So having guests like you can kind of tell that amazing story about Boundless is really fascinating.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it, and it has changed my life. Being invited to join a company like Salesforce I always had deep admiration for companies that could have double-digit compound annual growth rates for decades. And I worked in the hardware sector, data center switching and routing and wireless access points, and you're limited by physics, so it's hardware. You still have limitations, and I felt in software you're often limited by just your imagination, your talent, your processes, and so it was a pleasure to be able to join a company, and it has massively changed my life. And I think just looking back, the decisions you make 5 to 10 years ago is where you are today. 10 years ago, I decided to be social. I decided to do a podcast. And it led to being an evangelist. The decisions I make today will decide where I'm going to be 10 years from now.
Sure.
So as we have CIOs, IT leaders, and it doesn't need to be just at the CXO level. I want to talk to the 22-year-old that just graduated from Bentley or I say that because my daughter's about to graduate from Bentley at 22. I feel a sense of responsibility to tell these digital natives that it's amazing what you could do entering the workforce, because you've grown in the past decade where you've been able to challenge dominant logic. You're not holding on to these ideas so tightly as I did when I was in school. I remember with Mosaic and Netscape in 1993 was 1 year before I finished my undergrad, and the web comes online. This scientist Tim at CERN, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, it made the web IP available in 1993 to the world. Amazon launched the year after in 94, and Salesforce 99, Google 98. Even though I was an engineer, even though I was right in the trenches of the web, I didn't realize that this was the most important killer ingredient of my lifetime, until now, by the way. I didn't realize that the most valuable companies on earth are going to be internet companies. And even though quickly we saw the PC market go from around 200 million to 650 million, it tripled the market cap of technology companies that were web related. And then mobile tripled that again to 2.4 trillion. And then cloud tripled that again to 6.5 trillion. There's been this 3x effect of value of impact of technology companies, from PC to internet to mobile phones to cloud, my company. And if you follow that 3 to 3.5x effect, it means that the AI wave you and I are talking about is around a $20 trillion potential impact. And I think that's a conservative number. By the way, that's the GDP of the entire EU, 19 trillion. So what we're experiencing now, in my humble opinion, is electricity for the 21st century. And if you're a CIO, I can't imagine CIOs are ignoring it. It's too big. I can't imagine any CIO is ignoring it. I mean, it's got to be on your radar. It's got to be in production somewhere in your business. Because I'm telling you, Brian and Howie, in my humble opinion, and I'm not a futurist, although I spend every week with one. So maybe it's rubbing off on me.
Yeah, don't sell yourself short on that one.
Yeah, this is electricity. And this is, and I go back to my kids. I have a 22, 18, and 14. In no circumstances, my 18 and 14-year-old looking for work in the next 4 to 10 years. In no circumstance are they not in a position where they have to demonstrate strong AI proficiency.
Yes.
And liberal arts, engineer, it doesn't matter what. The interviewer is going to ask you, show me how you use AI on a daily basis. Who's your favorite advisor, digital advisor? Like, this is happening right now. I can't even imagine.
It's coming soon.
Yeah,
you talk about.
It's funny, Vala. I was last week, Howie and I were talking, and I made the comment about this is so reminiscent of when Netscape browsers kind of came out initially. Because it was like, I remember I was working in the investment industry at the time in Boston. And I remember going to our, management team and saying, we should put browsers on people's desktops. And they're like, why would we do that? It's sort of the same questions you're getting. You're like, well, so people get access to information, make people more productive, et cetera, et cetera. And we had to go through a trial in many ways, like a lot of companies right now, and a lot of CIOs are dealing with, really trying to, evolved the culture of their respective companies to sort of be kind of open-minded to these things, because I couldn't agree with you more that like this is like electricity. And it's like, and what's so exciting for me, and I think for people like you and others listening, is that, you know, it is completely transformational. I mean, there's almost no element of your day-to-day job that couldn't be touched by, you know, where kind of generative AI is kind of going and the implications. And you think of like a ChatGPT being a little over 2 years old, and that is like mind-boggling.
It is absolutely. But those of us, like I know you've been following AI for both of you for well over a decade. OpenAI was 2015, so most of us woke. Yeah. Most of the people we know woke up 2 years ago. But this was, GAN's generative adversarial network solutions. It was 2014 white paper that talked about generative AI. Richard Socher, our former chief AI officer at Salesforce, wrote his white paper in 2018 on natural language processing and generative AI. So this has been in the works for well over a decade. But in the last 2-3 years, as you know, Brian, I mean, 100 million people in 59 days had ChatGPT on their phone. The fastest adopted tech in our lifetime by an order of magnitude. Yeah. And now you're talking 2.4 billion users of generative AI across Cohere, Perplexity, Gemini, Llama, ChatGPT. It's mind-numbing, and it reminds me of one of the movies. I like true stories. Any movie that's a true story, I watch, because I just like movies that are about true stories. I'm a sucker for that too. Yeah. Yeah, totally. If it's a true story, I'm watching it. And 2 years ago, the movie that swept the Oscars, seven Oscars, including Best Film, Best Director, Best Actor, was Oppenheimer. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's a scene in Oppenheimer where Niels Bohr studied atomic structure. 1922 won the Nobel Prize. So one of the biggest thinkers and contributors to the Manhattan Project. He turns to Oppenheimer and says, "We need to convince the politicians this is not new technology. This is a new world." He says, "Oppenheimer, you gave mankind the one tool that it can use to destroy itself." Now, I don't have a gloom and doom. I don't want to make this analogy about AI being destructive, but this is not about technology. This is a new world. By the way, Niels Bohr was a founding member of CERN. The founding father of CERN. He wanted to democratize access to information so people be more aware of new emerging tech and the power. So the web and all of that we owe to Niels Bohr. But when we're talking about this, I hope that CIOs are championing the conversation, not with the same urgency that they had when it came to IoT or metaverse or cloud or mobile or social or Internet of Things or immersive technologies like AR, VR, MR. This is a new world. And when you work at a technology company that operates on first principles, sometimes people question your motives. Oh yeah, the chief evangelist at an AI company naturally is going to be very bullish about AI. Right. And so I have to find energy, but grace and humility, where we're framing these conversations so people are at least motivated to learn more. Because if they're not, they're going to be left behind. And I don't know how, as an individual or a team or a company, I really don't know how you can grow and thrive if you ignore this technology.
Yeah.
I just don't see how you do it.
Vala, you talk about 3 waves of AI with a 4th coming. Can you dive into that with us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, we've been talking about, a word that we've used for the last decade, digital transformation. And I always equated digital transformation to your data maturity capabilities. When you go through your data maturity capability, the first muscle you build is describing what happened in the past, descriptive use of analytics. So we go to board meetings, QBRs, and we talk about year over year, month over month. We're always describing the past with data. And as Clay Christensen reminded us, late Harvard professor, business professor, author of Innovator's Dilemma, and 15 other books that are the best books about management and innovation, in my humble opinion, all the data we have is from the past. None of us have data about the next minute, the next hour, tomorrow. So describing the past. And then when you describe the past, well, you tend to have to describe why things happened. Why is our revenue declining? Why is our net promoter increasing? So diagnostic use of analytics. Once you can diagnose and describe the past, the business will ask you to predict what's going to happen tomorrow. And this is the first time algorithms and theories have to come to fruition. So it's predictive use of analytics. Predicting, your forecast, your total lifetime value, your customer retention. So first time use of formulas and algorithms. And the companies with the best algorithms are going to win. We're in an algorithmic economy. But if I could predict this, Mega Millions Tuesday number, and I don't play the number, it's really no value. So the end game is not prediction; it's prescriptive use of analytics, prescribing the actions you need to take to have those predictions come to fruition. So we've gone through an AI first wave where using AI, we could create predictive models, and those predictive models can help prescribe next best action wherever you are in business. From October of 2022 and beyond, consumers had access to the next wave, which was generative use of AI. So wave one, predictive, wave two, generative. And you and I, for most of our careers, we pushed a button on this device, few electrons went to some data center somewhere, and we retrieved information. So it was retrieval only until wave two, where now it's retrieving and generating that new. That changed everything. That changes how we design hardware, how we design software. We've now, co-pilots and chatbots are now helping us. And this is what I call assistive mode. It's assisting us to learn more by generating content that's not only relevant, but timely and accurate. Now, the science that allowed that was, first of all, our language capabilities. For 10 years, we've been writing NLP logic that's improved language, understanding of language. The second thing was reasoning engine. We've been able to improve reasoning logic. So using technologies like RAG, retrieval augmented generation, vector databases. There's a number, I don't want to geek out, although it is a CIO audience. So it's one place I felt safe geeking out is here.
It's here. Yeah.
But language, computer visioning, because it's multimodal, you can feed it an image, you can feed it a video. And these are all now capabilities that are on par to human or better. NLP is on par, computer visioning is on par, human or better, and then reasoning engine. But because we have understanding of language and reasoning, we've now entered a third wave where we've given agency to software to go from assisting us to autonomously doing the work on our behalf. The third wave is agentic. And what we're finding at my company, just in the last 12 months, this is not like years of agentic use cases. These are measured in months and not quarters. We have implemented an agentic layer in every line of business within our company. 5 million lines of code have been produced and in production at Salesforce through agents. To give it context, and I don't know that as a percentage of new software code, but I know 50% of GitHub right now is AI-generated software. Over 30% of Alpha and Google's AI new software is developed by AI, only because the CEO shared that at World Economic Forum a couple of weeks ago. And so an example of what it means in terms of third wave, our website, help.salesforce.com, anyone can access, help.salesforce.com. We get 60 million visitors to come to the site on an annual basis. Now, the nature of contact is, I would say, medium to high complexity. I'm not selling Nike shoes. It's not consumer goods product. It's enterprise software help. How do I create a dashboard for my sales team? It's that type of inquiry.
Right.
In the last 6 weeks, it's been operated by agentic layer. The humans at Salesforce had never reached greater than 61% first contact closure. Meaning the first time somebody comes to help at salesforce.com, 61% of the time, 61 out of 100 times, humans could answer their inquiry in the first interaction in a way where you close the case. The
Prior
user felt satisfied. In the world of service, we call it first contact closure. Today, if you go to our website, we keep track every week on how we're doing. Every week, you can go to our website, everybody can see it. So last week we had 32,000 inquiries. Of those 32,000 inquiries, this is as of February 9th. 87% of contact was close first contact. 87.
Wow. That's impressive.
26% greater than
That's a
ever
needle
by
mover.
humans.
Right.
What does that tell you? Well, what it tells you is, one, how do we measure the value of experience moving forward? You spend decades becoming a chess grandmaster or a Go master. Then AlphaGo Zero plays itself for 4 days, and no human can ever beat it ever again. So how do we measure experience as we onboard people, as we retain people? What does experience really mean? How do we define work? Like physics, work means moving an object a certain distance. And the level of work depends on how heavy is the object, how far do I have to move it? So effort comes into play. Effort. We measure work by effort and experience. What is effort when you have access to boundless computing and memory? What does effort mean anymore? Like, what does effort mean for us when we close 87% of 36,000 cases with software? So I challenge CIOs and business leaders to rethink about, what do we do when we have to define work and experience and mindset? Because throw out the playbook.
Yeah.
Throw out the playbook. What you thought was going to be critical success factor for you, and it has been, getting you to where you are today. I promise you, it's a different rules, different playbook, different set of capabilities. And what that means for us at Salesforce is we now have senior leaders, and these are difficult conversations, I have to say, where we are thinking about our manpower and resources. Like, when you can resolve, and in 6 weeks, when we started, it was 81%, we're at 87% in 6 weeks. I'm afraid 6 weeks from now, it'll probably be in the 90 percentile, which means in the future history of Salesforce, no human will ever be able to provide better service than our agents today.
Yeah.
So what does that mean when you have 3,000 men and women providing service today?
Yeah. And it's funny, we've been hiring a number of resources recently, and we were talking internally, and someone asked a question about, like, what skill would you say kind of defines what you're looking for? And we were saying, like, good athletes. And I don't mean those that can throw 95.
High rate of learning. High rate of
yeah, because it's
judgment.
like, I mean, if you are an excellent, I don't know, pick a job, developer, or maybe you're a lower entry level developer, and now suddenly, there's AI tools out there that can effectively, do what you can do. And so I think it's really puts a premium on companies working with colleges, the curriculum that colleges are teaching, the hiring attributes that we look for. They're evolving. I remember looking at something IBM had produced, and they talked about the same thing, looking for, like, the good athlete, the person that can move from, like, one technology to another, someone who can pivot and learn new things. And if you kind of chose technology thinking that you weren't going to have to, like, learn a lot, well, you made a huge mistake. I mean, it was bad enough in years past, but it is now complete hockey stick. And
it is. And for people like you and Howie and I, we have such high sense of urgency, because the founder of my company goes on major media and says, in the 25-year history of Salesforce, this year, calendar year 25, we're not hiring any more engineers, because the average engineer at my company is now producing way above average output.
Yeah.
Because they're using the tools like you use every day, and they're better writers, they're better critical thinkers, they have wider aperture of understanding of contextual understanding of what's around them, their stakeholder needs, what's a measure of success. So dimensionality of knowledge has a greater elasticity for these folks now. So our average engineers above average. Now, I have to say, our unicorn software developers, they're not improving a step function by using AI. They're unicorns. They're awesome.
Right.
And by the way, unicorn software developer, as you know, is like 1 out of 100. The 10x engineer. We've heard that in Silicon Valley terminology for the 10x engineer who produces 10x the output. Now, what we're doing is we're taking those unicorn engineers and they're training our models. They're actually improving our reasoning engine. They're improving the grounded information we use to help create new software. So our models are getting trained by the unicorns. What I have to say, as not like a warning, I don't want it to sound like I'm an optimist. The pessimists sound smarter, but in my career, the optimists are the people that create the future. So I have no interest in being pessimistic about any of this, although I think there's major inflection points that we have to be aware of, and we can't bullshit each other. Like, Like companies are designing using an AI first strategy. And if you're thinking about the robo-taxis that are in San Francisco now, if you get into a robo-taxi in San Francisco, especially when Tesla puts out their fleet, when you get in the robo-taxi, Brian, Howie, there is no steering wheel.
Yeah, it's unnerving.
I know.
When you
It's
it's a little.
There is no pedal. There is no gas or brake. So how do you design an autonomous vehicle with AI first, not human first? Because frankly, if it was a human first design, surely you'd have a steering wheel. Somebody had to have the foresight to say the safest way to operate this vehicle is no longer a steering wheel, and you don't need actuators. A gas and pedal are actuators. Accelerate, decelerate. Steering wheel is left, right. There's only 4 common actuators in a car. And now that user interface is no longer human user interface. So as you're building your enterprise stack with a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, what steering wheel and pedals are being removed out of business? Because if AI is UI, are there any more static dashboards? Is every interaction really conversational in nature first choice, text second choice? It is multimodal, so you could feed it a WAV file with sound or video or a picture. But I'd like to be able to read a book, like you mentioned, and not ask for a summary, but say create a 10-page PowerPoint slide of the book. And graph the takeaways, because I'm a visual learner. Our brains processes as an image 60,000 times faster than text. We actually can look at an image and understand it within around 13 milliseconds, which is about 60,000 times faster than text. So with a 90% retention versus low teen retention if it's text. So I want language models to create pictures of books, pictures of my CEO's keynote address, so I can follow along much faster and have much more depth and understanding and contextual understanding. And I think it's going to be the role of what you do, Brian, because in the history of IT, CIOs were champion identifying the best tool, handing off the tool to their internal customers, and then the customers it was up to them how they used it, how they optimized it. Maybe this is why we have shelfware. Maybe this is why we don't leverage all of the capabilities that software providers or hardware providers have. We have 3 releases a year. Salesforce probably introduces 200 new features and functions across our portfolio. The most advanced customers we have in the world, I'm afraid, probably use low double-digit, maybe 10, 11% of what we offer. And these are our best customers. Our best customers. Yeah. So now IT's role, fast forward, you're building agentic AI where software is taking action. You are now more like HR. You have to know about policies, regulate actions, guardrails, channels that make sense.
We're in a huge one now. It's like, where are people spending their time? So we can track those things, right? Like it's like so funny. It's like, we always talk about driving revenue and, controlling expenses, but, so much of the future, especially around generative AI, is around productivity. How do we make people more productive? How do we get answers to, in our case, fans? Like, how do we, anticipate those questions, right? So that it's a seamless experience,
Absolutely.
And so, I think we have a shared vision for what the future can be. And I'm like you, I'm like super positive about this. There are some, to your point, inflection points, or some realities that, if you're listening to this and you're, a CIO or an aspiring CIO, it's like, some people used to say, CIO is, chief information officer, but the I is really innovator in many ways nowadays,
Absolutely.
And
more and more CIOs are expected to be the chief AI officer. Meaning other line of business. I used to be chief marketing. I was chief customer, and I was head of engineering, vice president, not chief, but vice president. I would go to my CIO and expect him or her to teach me about, like, what am I hearing about, like the 4th wave being physical AI? Like, how does robotics come into play? And how does the reasoning engine allow us to create a manufacturing environment where your colleague is a digital entity? I just recently visited Boston Dynamics, which is, as you know, Brian, it's like 15-minute drive for both of us. And I can't speak to it because I can't speak to it. But what I saw, oh my God, And this isn't Spot the dog or Atlas the humanoid. This was their next generation. There are stuff that's happening that, I mean, the future is already here. It's just not unevenly distributed.
Yeah, you know, it's a book. You know, it's a book to follow up on yours is around the. You know, you mentioned the word like future proofing. You know, it's like, because I do think that is sort of like job number one for people kind of aspiring to be CEOs and CTOs sometimes. And it's like, there are some obvious things, right? Besides the type of attributes that we think make the best employees in the future. But another one's like, I mean, it's oversaid sometimes, but data. Like if you haven't get your arms around your data quality, like just like start immediately, because all these other things are just going to exacerbate your company's inability. You're going to be looking at all these other people, going warp speed and wondering why you're grinding it out, and so
it is absolutely true. It was Albert Einstein who said nothing happens until something moves.
Something moves.
Right.
And when I hear, the more companies automate, the more autonomous capabilities, you start to resemble living organisms. Us three are pretty autonomous. Humans tend to be fairly autonomous. All living organisms, whether it's plant-based, human-based, we're flow-based. We are healthy and we grow and thrive based on healthy flow. If you research the top 10 reasons people die, cease to exist, 6 of the 10 top reasons are due to blockages. Flow anomalies, aneurysms in the brain, cardiovascular heart attacks, respiratory failures. Mm-hmm. It's really flow-based, flow of oxygen. And flow is hard to, it's not hard to detect blockages with us because you go up a set of stairs, you're out of breath. You can't play. I have a 14-year-old. I can't do full court basketball with them without timeout, but we have blood thinners, we have aspirin, we have stents. You could have surgery. There are ways for us to identify a blockage and fix it. Sometimes short-term, sometimes long-term remediation. Imagine blockages in business. Go to ChatGPT and type of blockages in business. You're going to get 60 to 100 different types of blockages. From Brian, the CEO, went on a 2-week vacation. Everything halts in terms of approving budget. Everything halts in terms of, it could be simple vacation, or you left the business, or it could be budget related. It could be you had a riff in the company. There are literally hundreds of blockages in business. And what people don't realize is in business, super hard to identify a blockage, super hard to root cause, super hard to remediate quickly. And I think one of the advantage of autonomy in this composability of identifying jobs to be done and then constantly iteratively getting better. We've talked about Kaizen approach, the Japanese philosophy of continuous improvement, but it was up to humans to make sure they adopted and maintained Kaizen. When it comes to agentic AI, Kaizen is built into it because the reasoning engine is always looking for better optimization, faster, more scalable, more personable. So Kaizen, this is what I call a machine scale operating model called SUDA. In the military, at some point when you're in a stealth bomber, the pilot is ejected from operating the plane because the SUDA, the sense, S is sense, understand, decide, and act, SUDA, has to be so fast that no human pilot, no matter how accomplished, can do it fast enough. So the military wrote a white paper, I think came out in 2019, and it referenced machine scale SUDA, where in a military aircraft was the first example of machine scale SUDA. The human was disengaged from operating the model. Now, most of us who fly commercial long enough know it's the first 10-minute takeoff and last 10-minute landing where the human is involved. Majority of the time, the plane is on its own. But in business, we're now finding, and I just gave an example of agent force with Salesforce and support going from 61 to 87, the ability to sense what a customer needs and understand, to decide, and act. That delta T from sensing and acting is converging to 0. We often in tech world have been calling it real time. Yeah. It's happening. Through the model, machine scale in business, it's going to create, unfortunately, it's like digital Darwinism. Remember Darwin said the survival of the fittest? Survival of the fittest. What does it mean to be fit as a company in an AI first economy? If you can't sense and act in real time, you're a dead business. I Again, I'm sorry. I don't mean to gloom and doom.
No, it's great. It's great stuff. I mean, you think too. I mean, our COVID experience kind of awakened so many of us to sort of the frailty of our supply chain. And you think of supply chain in the mindset you just described, and like it already is in some ways, but it needs to be this another future-proofish model, where it's thinking about alternative routes. It's thinking about, oh, there's an interruption in the service here. I need to kind of go around it in things. And it's like, there's so much in business. I'm so excited though. I mean, we're very fortunate, living here in the United States and having the capital markets and the investments that are made and companies, being committed to sort of continue to kind of remake themselves and things like that, I'm very optimistic about what it means for our country, because I feel like we are in such a good place to sort of leverage these. Yeah, there'll be challenges, there'll be inflection points and things like that. But I think, all these things that you describe are all sort of leading hopefully to a world where higher GDP, higher productivity, and I also think even the fear oftentimes of the implications to job growth or loss. It's like a little bit like when the internet came out, or then when mobile apps came out, everyone's like, oh, it's going to do away jobs. It creates new jobs, new kinds of jobs. It creates different kinds of capacity and opportunities and things like that didn't exist before. And so, if you live in an organization, if you're in an organization or a country that's sort of evolving, you just need to kind of, especially for younger folks, like you were talking about, we both have, kids are in high school. It's like, I talk to my daughter all the time about like, she is so adept at various generative AI products that she shows me things all the time. And, and her and her friends in different areas, not always in areas that you and I work, but like a lot of things with like and imagery and stuff. And I look at things and I have no idea these existed. And she'll say to me, she goes, aren't you like a CIO? I mean, I think I can do your job, and I'm like, well,
believe you me, I have to defend digital evangelists at home all the time. My 14-year-old son was watching me search the web for an image to put in my Google Slides. And he comes up, he has Midjourney, and he shows me an image that was unbelievably better. Unfortunately, it was for ZDNET, and ZDNet doesn't allow AI-generated content. Companies are still struggling with intellectual property rights.
Right.
I had to explain to my 14-year-old, yes, son, I know Midjourney. Thank you for showing me. I just can't use it. But I love the fact that these digital natives can watch legacy work. And by the way, this is a warning to employers. You think you're going to hire the very best talent to come work for your company if you can't demonstrate to them how proficient you are with AI or the AI tool sets that you make available to them. The notion that somebody's going to graduate from any of the institutions that your kids and my kids, these are some of the best schools in the country. My daughter is going to work full-time at Deloitte in their digital transformation part of the business. She was super selective where she was going to go, and they were able to demonstrate to her that she can expand her learning by joining Deloitte. Believe you me, there's no chance she was going to work for a company that would prohibit her ability to work with the greatest set of tools that are available.
Yeah, you said something I remember reading, Vala, just reminded me of it, that Google I had or still has, that model of, allocating 20% of your time, toward intellectual, curiosities and innovation and things. And, it's funny, 1,000 years ago, I worked at Wang Labs, and Wang Labs would get upset with you if you didn't allocate 10% of your time to things. And, but it's like, you think about these things, that is one of the challenges that we face a little bit. Because I also think of one of my early jobs where I was trying to design some system. And I remember my boss came by, the CEO, and he said, God, it makes me nervous when you don't have your fingers on the keyboard. and I think the one thing oftentimes that companies take for granted is this like think time, it's like this time that you need to really be so creative. I mean, I know you travel a lot, but like when I'm on an airplane, oh my goodness, the amount of ideas that I think about just because I'm not that moment, and thinking about 47 projects and the status of them are and things like that. So I feel like somehow we're going to do a better job and maybe learn something from Google here and see what we can't do to allocate the time where people can have that creative juices and the ability to be able to kind of execute on them.
And I think
that allocated time. Sorry, Paula. Yeah, that allocated time kind of went away in the last 15 years in our corporate culture.
Yeah, a lot of,
outside of outliers.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it, but Val, I could talk to you forever, but the other thing is kind of closely related to this is sort of the decisions that companies make about education. Like, you mentioned about how do you retrain or retool some of these folks you've got, we can come up with creative models for new employees, but, we've got a whole workforce that have got us here. And I think we owe them, and have a responsibility to ensure that they can sort of have the aptitudes to continue to kind of evolve and mature and, be a long-term player kind of in this new world that's being created.
Absolutely. And I think it's a leadership, something that leadership needs to emphasize. And, we talk about sports, you need to be a player coach. At my company, it's mandatory for every employee, 75,000. All of us need to be able to build AI agents. It's a 3-hour Trailhead module. Some can do it in 30 minutes. For me, it's 3 hours because, but it's only hours. It's not measured in days. It's not weeks, but 75,000. Anyone you meet at Salesforce has built, because it's mandatory, an AI agent. Now, there's lots of modules you can take before you actually build an agent, because you want to understand system prompts. You want to understand the trust layer. When somebody says masking or zero retention or testing for toxicity and bias, these can't be foreign principles to you, because as you're building your agent, you have to understand these components. But it's mandatory. It's part of you have to have it at every level. But our founder is showing us how he's building agents. So, it's my advice to CIOs. And I think this one measure of success for you two, in my humble opinion, is a year will go by and you look back at your audience, CIO listeners, contributors, guests. And I suspect some of these CIOs will be CEOs. My company founder believes, and he said this publicly, that the best line of business, the line of business leader that's most suited to successfully champion companies in the AI economy are CIOs, because the unicorn CIO, and it's not just 1 out of 100, but the unicorn CIO has a strong mix of business acumen and technology, understands concepts of empathy, understands the importance of education, understands that you have to walk around, going back to Managed by Walking Tom Peters. Yeah. If you're going to build autonomous business where you're giving agency for software to do the job, you have to understand marketing. You have to understand human resources. You have to understand manufacturing. Because it's a cognitive download from human to software. And if you're the technology partner that's going to make that happen, how can you not understand measure of success from that functions point of view?
It's funny you say that. I was thinking about this the other day, because we're hiring a resource in this area, but I think we at times companies have moved to a little bit away from business analysts, right? You think something you think about your company today, we have sort of oftentimes, I feel like this is like an iceberg, the metaphor of the iceberg. We oftentimes understand 10% of how these departments function.
Right.
And if we're going to apply these generative AI solutions, you got to go way deeper, and you really have to kind of explore, because all of our companies, have, a lot of institutional knowledge, and there's institutional things that have been put in there in place. And, and you almost have to start with a clean slate and reimagine sort of what this could look like without having to kind of be looking at, 10 or 20 or 50 years worth of history to kind of get there, and it's.
Our CIO, when he was tasked about, months ago, to go to our 60 million visited website and put an agentic layer, the first thing our CIO had to do was identify a committee to rag the language model. Sorry, rag. Tech, again, I'm geeking out here. But to ground our language model with all the content that we felt the language model needed in order to effectively respond to an inquiry. We fed 700,000 pieces of documents to our help.salesforce.com, and they were all over the place. Yep. It wasn't just confined to our knowledge base. Because it turns out, and again, I don't want to talk products, but we have this thing at Salesforce that allows us. It's called Data Cloud. I shouldn't not mention products, but I rarely speak products because I've got 75,000 colleagues that talk products. But we have this thing called Data Cloud. It took us 3,000 engineers 3 years to build. But what it allowed us to do was to bring process to data rather than move data to our process, which we use zero copy technology, which means you can use Databricks, Snowflake, AWS, Azure. It doesn't matter where you put your data. We will access that data structured, and in this case, more importantly, unstructured. We found, close to 80% of the data we had was unstructured data, PowerPoint slides, PDFs, white papers, emails. It wasn't structured in a CRM knowledge-based tree.
Yep. But
RAGing, and again, using semantic search and vector database, those three were the pillars of getting us relevant data, semantic search, vector, and RAG. In 700, but it was IT that led that exploration of where does data sit that can help us get to human level 61%. Little do we know, in 5 weeks, we're going to be at 87. But it was a CIO, it was IT who understood, and it goes back to health and blockages and the importance of data. And the tenacity of the CIO to look beyond just our support repository of data to say, look, if an architect has written a best practice on optimizing this thing, and we get 200 inquiries a week on this thing on our support site, make sure that PDF is part of our language model training. That wouldn't have come from line of business outside of IT. Someone with critical thinking who understood the more you refine the language model, the better, the more accurate.
And the other thing they solved in the same time period, I think, which is remarkable, is so Juan Perez, I believe, is here.
Yeah. You know Juan. Okay,
he's amazing, and is not just okay, now we can integrate with a data cloud, but like we can all do it now through like APIs or direct connections. Right. So it's no longer just, all right, now we got a big ETL jobs. They got to like lift data and move it over into another place and then reconsume it and things like it's like,
look, you're giving me goosebumps. I don't normally get on podcasts where people are builders of the tech I talk about. Okay, all right.
Well, welcome to the project.
I think how exciting it is. It's like it's exciting because by the way, it all comes back to data quality again. But it also becomes like, I mean, your reference to real time or near real time. It's like there were so many clunky things in this factory historically, right? Like, okay, I get clean data. Now I've got to like write these jobs and I got to make them wake up at certain times. And I got to build an observability to make sure that the jobs actually functioned. And then I got to move them over or clone them into another place. And I'm paying compute for that. And I'm paying extra storage for that. And so it's
managing lakes in my house is a nightmare.
Yeah. I'm so encouraged just about the efficiencies that are kind of being baked into a lot of these new methodologies.
And I think CIOs, have to challenge all vendors that they plan to invite to their homes. As you're building your tech stack, show me what you're doing. There's a lot of whitewashing around this topic, as with any emerging tech. All the cool kids on the block want to make sure that they showcase their AI capabilities. It's you just have to be mindful of. A demo is worth 1,000 slides, and invite the vendor to show me how the sausage is made. It's important because velocity, speed, and direction. You can be going really fast, but you bet on the wrong horse. Or you're going in the right direction. It may be a little bit slower than you're accustomed to, but this is the right direction, so you give them some grace. There's some, balancing act there.
Right, and on that same topic, it's like I just feel like the other thing that CIOs in particular need to kind of continue to evolve on is understanding sort of like when you need to be sort of when is it important to be sort of a champion in a certain area, especially around AI, versus a fast follower versus a laggard, and like you need to kind of assess your whole stack because you can't be the best at all these things. No one has enough money. No one has enough time. They don't have enough resources to kind of make it all happen. So, in my mind, what gets really exciting about the future is us learning from one another so that we can, because as you would, I'm sure agree, like when the challenge that we're at now is use cases and, trying to figure out which use cases are going to move the needle, and there's a lot of, effort going on right now, but there's also a lot of challenges trying to figure out, like, whether it's kind of the juice is worth the squeezing on some of them.
Totally.
And
Totally.
someone asked me this.
And I would extend that to use cases in production, because you often hear Musk, he regularly repeats that to build a manufacturing system is 100x harder than the pilot or the prototype. So all these cool EV manufacturers show their EV car, and he's like, yeah, build me 1,000 a week, build me 10,000 a month,
different ball game.
And a different ball game. And I just recently worked with I can't name the institution, but one of the largest banks in the world, a large bank in the financial sector. And anyway, they're large enough where they have north of 100 data scientists, pure data scientists, 100. Working on building AI set of capabilities. And what the CEO told me is that in the lab, the do-it-yourself example, with 100 data scientists working with another set of hundreds of practitioners and CRM experts and this, that, and the other, they were able to successfully show in the lab a use case. Then they decided to take this use case, and this was in the sales function, not service function. It was SDR, BDR coaching, and using generative AI to engage and prospect. So it was hunting function and coaching. Then they went to production, and it didn't work, because in the lab versus putting it in flow of work, where the sales BDR SDRs, and these were thousands of BDR SDRs. This is one of the largest banks in the world. It didn't work in production. So another advice I have for CIOs is there is a best of breed. You find a company that may be the hottest at the moment. There is a do-it-yourself. Take your 100 data scientists, build it yourself. And then there's partner with large-scale providers that have a legacy of demonstrating inflow of work use case. So don't be enamored by the prototype EV that looks really cool, but you couldn't sell a fleet of them because they can't produce it at scale.
Right.
So use case in production to me is critically important, because there's right now 2,000 AI solution providers. Right. If you look at the landscape, just in agentic AI. So it's the largest sector that's being funded in terms of VC money.
Right.
And every tech company is Salesforce Ventures. We're the most active corporate venture capital arm in the U.S. So we have a $2 billion fund focused on, $1 billion fund focused on generative AI, agentic AI only startups. So even companies like Salesforce are putting massive amount of funding into this space. So you're going to find lots of names, lots of logos, lots of people making great claims, and some may be amazing. But if I can't see it built in a sandbox where it's using my volume of contact, the complexity of contact, the profile of the stakeholders that I serve in a semi-production or production, I'm not signing a long-term contract. I'm not.
Yeah. You know what you remind me of too? It's like, someone asked me a question about all the different AI tools I've looked at, and I said, well, I've kissed a lot of frogs.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But I would say, but I've also been, blown away, obviously, by just kind of where we can get. But, it is remarkable, Joe, that a lot of these products, and I think a lot of the companies that are funding a lot of the startups, one of the challenges they're going to have is some are, as you know, some have sort of narrow value. It's a generative AI solution that operates on a very, very narrow model. Some are obviously larger and broader and things like that can satisfy, 60-80% of a company's needs in certain areas and things. But some of those very specific ones, they're going to have to realize that, because I've had these conversations with VCs too, is that companies aren't going to pay large money for super narrow use cases unless they generate high value add or there's a massive ROI. And I think the ROI challenge is the new challenge, right? It's to your point before about whether it's a car or it's a, generative AI product. It's it's show me prove that I can, I could realize efficiency gains, that I can drive revenue, that I can sort of, field a bit of work for, solve a different, different problems and stuff. So, unfortunately, a little bit, given where we are today, the burden a little bit is going to be on them to be educators.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Sure. And a venture capitalist that I spoke with I think it was a year or so ago, said, don't be enamored with the language models so much. Think about, and he gave a historical reference. He said when the refrigerator came out, all the institutional investors, all the folks in the money markets, they thought the inventors of refrigerators were going to be the biggest brands, most notable brands, most valuable companies on earth. And it ended up being Coca-Cola and Pepsi. So, these language models, they're the fridge. It's that cold beverage. That's the brand. So when we talk about use cases, what we as CIO community technologists working closely with our business partners, we have to think about what's that killer use case that's going to increase revenue. It's going to improve EBITDA. It's going to increase efficiency. It's going to improve employee retention and bring joy back to work. Knowing research today shows, Pew Research, 41% of all work that we do, knowledge work we do, is low value, repetitive, highly deterministic work. This is why people are constantly looking for their next gig. So let's find a place where it's not just sense of belonging, but sense of mattering. You work at a place where you belong and you feel your work matters. Absolutely. And that's the promise I think AI, in the right hands with the right leaders, can provide. And I'm so thankful that you two are doing your podcast, because as folks that are actually building state-of-the-art capabilities, as folks that have helped pioneer and advise, and you're leading the largest consortium of CIOs in the world, Brian, you must have a heavy burden on you. I can't imagine there isn't a day that doesn't go by where you're like, I've never felt more responsible, Brian and Howie, to educate and inspire my cohorts, because it's a new world. This is more than just new technology. So you're the Niels Bohr of the 21st century.
There we go. Final question on this topic, Vala. For our audience, who consist of both staff, management, and executives in the technology and IT spaces, what's the one piece of advice you'd give them around this very hot topic?
Wow, that's don't delegate this. Like, I know Brian's using AI tools every day, because when I have lunch with Brian, he actually does he shares his wisdom nuggets with me, and then I take notes and I go home and try new tools that I hadn't heard of, only because I had lunch with Brian. This is why I regularly plead to connect with him, because he's my mentor and he doesn't even know it. He expands my mind. But the way he expands my mind, he tells me how he's using the tool and the benefits he sees, and he uses he says things like, related to ChatGPT, this tool is a better tool for writing. And I'm like, oh, okay. So he's giving me context. Yep. It's relative to something else. So as a CIO, this isn't like, don't hire an AI guru and delegate to him and her and think you're off the hook. This is not something like we did that as a technologist. I had my cloud architect, my data architect, my social media manager, and I think this is one where, if I was back in the game, responsible for identifying the tech stack, responsible for helping our company strategically grow its relevance, and the language of business is finance. There are no IT projects. There are only business projects. I would not delegate this to anyone exclusively. Yes. I would be a player coach. I would be suit up. I would be on the field. I would get scrapes and bruises. Yep. And I would be Bill Russell, winning the championship rings as a player coach. And if you're not a player coach, I think it's moving so fast, you might find your relevance to be in question. So you want CIO tenure to get to 4 or 5 years.
This is the one to roll up our sleeves and get our hands dirty. This is the one.
If there's ever been, and I didn't say this about any other technology. I didn't say about Web3. I didn't say it about blockchain. I didn't say it about, and I've been a crypto investor for 6 years now. So I've been bullish on, which, by the way, meant I looked like a fool for majority of those years. I'm looking okay now. But, but this is one you want to bet your career on. My final.
Howie and I talked before about the same thing, Vala, about, there was a day, call it 15, 20, 25 years ago, where CIO oftentimes meant career is over, and we were talking about it from the perspective of the reason in many ways is because you look across the C-suite, like the role of the CFO or CMO or certain roles, they're evolving. I mean, CMO is evolving a lot faster now, but they're evolving, but they didn't have to evolve the same speed by which these technology roles happen. And so, I saw it all the time. Companies would hire a great operational CIO, right? Yeah. And we used to see you talk about this back in the day. And next thing you know, they're like, wow, great job. You got our operations in order. So now we want to be innovative.
Yeah.
And then you realize, you're an innovative guy.
But Brian, they had a little bit of history on their side. Like, how long did it take for cloud adoption? We spent 10 years convincing CIOs it's as secure, as scalable, and gives you agility and ability to innovate unlike any time before. But it took 10, 15 years. How long before BYOD was disrupted by, look, my home tool can't be better than my work tool? It took 4 or 5 years for CIOs to say, your average CIO, not you guys. You guys were your trailblazers. But
of course not.
So if you're a CIO, majority of them are like, I got time. Look, it took a decade for this. I got time. And you don't.
Yeah, you don't also, when we came out with this, the other thing about it, it's my dog, but we came out with this, the other thing that people forget, CIOs oftentimes forget, I believe, is that the bar is getting raised even though you don't realize it, right? Because when people go into really compelling, exciting, great UI, apps on their phone, and they go to work and they're working with some clunky client server app that hasn't been reimagined in 15 years, like you're automatically, the bar's getting set up high, and these people are, they're being looked at like they're laggards, right? And so to your point, like, it is so compelling that companies and employees, obviously, that they're continuing to learn, but there's, you're not just moving the technology for the sake of moving it, but like really sort of, so we can hire the right best people and you can sort of get the best results. And
the expectations are continuing to, I just bought recently my first Tesla. And, my folks are like, oh, geez, I heard this is the 9th recall on Tesla. What's going on? I'm like, yeah, it's all software upgrade. Like, I don't, but whatever. Okay, yeah, recall.
I got to plug in, you're like,
By the way, it's self-parks. I can summon it. It's self-drive. So, yeah, I mean, this is stuff but I got to tell you, my next car manufacturer, like, I'm going to be asking, like, do you do over-the-air upgrade? Like, and I can't imagine driving for service. Like, it better have those set of capabilities. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to be in an EV autonomous vehicle all the time. I love cars, and sometimes I love the traditional cars. But I got to tell you, my expectations are vastly different. And you're right. And this is difficult maybe for CIOs to hear. We're looking for CIOs to help us understand this new world we're a part of, and not just so that we survive. We want to thrive. We want to grow. We want to have beautiful careers. Yeah. So IT now has an opportunity. You're right. The I is not information. It's intelligence. It's innovation. It's ingenuity. It's so many dimensions to that I.
Juan and I both belong to are members of Inspire CIO, and as we talked about earlier in the podcast, and one of the things that my hope is that these learnings, like, we need to be better at disseminating these learnings quickly, because everyone's going to be at different levels in their adoption phase and whatever's appropriate for their respective companies and culture and things. But like, sharing right now, if you're not part of an organization like that where you can learn from one another and you can sort of you don't have to be a domain expert in all these different areas, because you have others that are like that, in my mind, is what separates relatively successful folks from like the best, especially in times of rapid change. And it's, we're on a hockey stick right now. And so there's never been a better time.
Totally. And the last thing I would say, Howie, is reverse mentoring.
Yeah.
Like, this is a space where you're not going to find, 50, 60-year-old white hair experts coming in and talking to you. It's literally the 20s, 30s. Like, you got to be open to having a staff meeting with the most junior person speaks up first. Yeah. What's the best language model you use for writing? What's the best language model you use for sales or marketing? What are some of the tools you're hearing? What are the best? Where should I go to on Discord or on X, or which forums on LinkedIn? Like, and you'll be surprised that the most knowledgeable people are not necessarily the most tenured. And does the CIO have the courage
Yeah.
to open up the floor to the recent BC grad or the Stanford or wherever they are in the country, your interns, your co-ops? I'm telling you, the wealth of knowledge is
Well,
incredible.
you've heard it first here, everybody. VALA AFSHAR, speaking truth.
Thank you.
All right,
Bob.
it's time.
much.
It's time. It's time. It's confession time, Valor.
No.
Oh, confession time. Okay,
Well,
I'm sorry. I didn't
you've
know
had
about
such.
this.
No, this is what we talked about earlier. You've had such a brilliant and fascinating career, and as Brian mentioned, we learn more from our failures than our successes, and we believe that failures, if channeled properly, can fuel greatness and drive innovation. Do you have an unsuccessful experience in your career that you reflect on as a defining moment in your amazing journey?
Now this is going to turn into a Lex Friedman 4-hour podcast. You're not going to find anyone that has more mistakes than I have. Doers make mistakes, and I consider the only superpower I have had in my career was just doing. I think when you have when you avoid having a zero-sum mindset, and you realize the world doesn't owe you a thing. And I think, again, that's immigrant mentality. I found out very early in my life that the world doesn't owe you anything. Seeing my parents go from an amazing life to having to work 2 jobs, 7 days a week for 25 years. So there's certain rigidity. Your work ethic reminds you that, you're the first in the room, you're the last to leave, you're working hard. So you tend to, at some point, maybe develop arrogance. You ask a question and you presume that you have the best answer because you've researched it in advance. You want to make sure, as a leader, you project a certain level of confidence in the knowledge. So I can say I was a shitty manager early in my career. My graduate professor trained me like a boot camp. I worked with a bunch of PhDs. It wasn't about getting the right answer. It was getting the right answer fast in a novel approach. So when I entered my career, I laughed at deadlines when somebody would give me an assignment and say it's due next month. And I'd be like, oh my God, at the university, this was due next Tuesday. At a much higher quality than you're expecting. So I entered my career really like a Navy SEAL, like a Marine, very hardworking, very demanding. And it helped propel my career. But I can say shitty manager because very quickly I was giving people responsibilities. And I demanded of them the same I had of myself, ignoring these were family men and women. They were more advanced in their career. And I thought maybe if I spot bonus them, I could make up for, I want you here on the weekend. I want you to work late. I work for private equity-led companies. So, it was a harsh blue-collar environment, but that was an excuse. When I reflect back, I was the guy that pulled the couch in the lab and slept the weekend to get a project delivered on time. And I expected my team to be the same. Really bad. I would never do that again. I think that type of experience and wisdom comes through age, I think, because I consider myself, above average, and I perform below average in terms of manager. Towards the end of my career, I got better. But a lot of my mistakes was expectations that were not realistic and unfair. I have to say, though, doers will make mistakes. Smart doers make original mistakes. If you make the same exact mistake twice, that's not a mistake. That's a choice. You decided to not learn. You decided to do the same thing. So, I encourage people to move fast. But it was John Wooden, I think, who said, go fast, but don't hurry. I think a lot of times I needed to slow down a bit, reflect on my behavior, and know that just because you bonus and promote someone, it doesn't give you a license to be an asshole. And I was that for a long time. And I realize that now. So
no, that's great guidance, because you can get on that, I don't know, that track where you're just, grinding to get.
I was crushing it, Brian, grinding and crushing it. And I drifted away from what it meant to be a reasonable human being. Yeah.
That's why it's so important as we talk about the skills that get us to the next level. It's like, yes, you want to be an innovator, ingenuity, and all these other kind of capabilities, but being sort of an empathetic listener and understanding your people and the culture and, the attributes you get the most out of people. I mean, getting the most out of people isn't always, as like working more hours.
Yeah,
absolutely. Right. I mean, I think some of this hybrid workforce has certainly proven that, different people learn in different ways. And, it's like, in my mind, I know you and I've talked about this before, but it's sort of finding that sort of blend that I think separates sort of, the best in class businesses.
To me, success is liking yourself, liking the work you do, and liking the way you do it.
Yeah.
And I can say early in my career, I didn't like how I did it. I liked the work. I liked my contributions, but the way I did it, I didn't like. So it wasn't total success, even though promoted and more responsible. My prior company, I was number 2 in the company. So majority of the company worked for me.
Right.
And so if you were keeping score, you're like, oh, this guy's crushing it. I wasn't. I was far from where I needed to be. And, I just hope that when you edit this episode, you don't lead with Vala Afshar claims he's an asshole.
Asshole.
I'm gonna put it's gonna be in the teasers. We're gonna be putting out these little teasers.
You might get a few more viewers, but it's my truth. I got to tell you, it's the truth.
Awesome.
It's beautiful.
Hopefully,
Vala,
people that work
so
with me don't chime in or disagree with my commentary and said he wasn't that bad. But anyway.
Well, Vala, we appreciate it so much. You spit so much truth today. It was just amazing. We loved having you on. We're not a 3 or 4 hour format, but I know that we could go with you for 3 or 4 hours, and it would be amazing. So we're going to have you back on before the end of the year.
My pleasure.
100%.
I'll be more brief the next time. By the way, this is why I have periodic lunches. With
no.
I can only get about an hour of his wisdom during lunch, so I need to do it multiple times. So I can grow my career.
No, there was no need to be brief. We just need to continue. We're going to continue the conversation with you. Everybody, Vala Afshar, Salesforce Chief Evangelist, author of Boundless. You got a new book coming out that we're going to talk about next time we get together. Tell us really quick what it is.
It's called Autonomous, and it's how to implement AI first design principles in this new world that we're a part of.
That's awesome.
All right. It's all about it. We're all about it. All right,
Thank
everybody.
Thank you, Val, so much. You're the best.
Thank you so much. I learned so much. Thank you both.
Take care.
Until next time, I'd like to leave you with a few short quotes from motivational speakers and authors that we think are aligned with the theme of today's importance of embracing change and the connectedness of people. From Tony Robbins, by changing nothing, nothing changes. From John C. Maxwell, leadership expert and author, change is inevitable, growth is optional. And finally, from our guest himself, Vala Afshar, technology doesn't transform business, people do, when they dare to connect, adapt, and dream bigger. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much.